Amaro, can I ask you, have you heard the name of a teacher called George G?
Of course. The meter of remarkable men.
Very found in this teaching something analogous. It's I've been with his teaching for about 25 years, so so that's my base.
Well, I read the In Search of the Miraculous by Uspensky and The Fourth Way when I was a student years and years ago. And even though there's a certain amount of practical guidance in there, one of the things that drew me towards Buddhism was the real living environment of doing the necessary, and that because I could read Gurdjieff and Uspensky and so forth when I was living a sort of student life and working in London or around and about. But then it's like you read the books and you think, oh yeah, great, fantastic, and then so that it was for me the living environment of Dhamma practice was the thing that I felt was so helpful, and what really drew me towards Buddhism in particular. But I would agree there's a lot of concordance between the spiritual approaches. You know, the word for mindfulness, sati, the Sanskrit root of it, also the Pali has a similar meaning, but the Sanskrit root of it is to remember. And that I know in Gurdjieff's work that they're remembering to remember.
It's what you describe in the actual practices that people are taught. It's really connection with the body, with the sense of being here, and connection with the breathing, and trying to be in a place that can observe without interfering in this.
Yeah, it's very closely aligned to what we would call mindfulness.
It's like the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, the famous teacher, probably the biggest name today. Buddhist teaching in all the things.
Oh, he used to visit here when he was... Eckhart Tolle used to visit here when he was still a confused and unfamous grad student at Cambridge, I think. He came and stayed here a few times. I might have even have been the guest monk when he came, but I don't have a clear memory of it. I don't remember. Well, please feel free to ask any questions that you have. I think we'll wait for everyone to come back in, so we can just start as... Yes?
Can I ask a question about hope? I'm thinking in the context of the Christian teaching about faith, hope and charity. If I try and relate it to Buddhist teaching, I can understand faith is not blind faith, but investigating and examining conditions and coming to an understanding of the truth. If I think about charity, I understand it as compassion and loving kindness, the direct sort of correlation with Buddhist teaching. When I think about hope, and I think about the unsatisfactoriness of phenomena and conditions as we experience them, I sort of also get this sense or feeling of hopelessness that goes with that. And when I think of hope within the normal context of our understanding of hope and the way we work, I find myself thinking that it's very akin to desire, and that in keeping with the second noble truth, we need to get rid of desire, we need to abandon desire. I just wonder if there is a sort of Buddhist equivalent to what Christians might regard as hope, or whether we abandon.
Lasciaro spere. Well, I'm also, as you're speaking, I'm reminded of the line from T.S. Eliot, I think from the Four Quartets: "To wait without hope, for to hope would be to hope for the wrong thing." And I think it's exactly what you're talking about. There's a kind of superficial hope, which is the way we would use the word in everyday language. But I suspect that in terms of faith, hope, and charity, there's a different level that is being pointed to. And in Buddhist practice, not all kinds of desire are the causes of dukkha, of suffering, and that I'm not sure exactly how the word would be used in a more profound sense in Christian terminology, but hope in terms of a basic trust that the liberation is possible, and that no error or no disharmony can be permanent, and so that there's a way of then also looking at that quality of hope in terms of a desire, in terms of aiming your actions towards that potentiality. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So that kind of desire is called chanda, and chanda, chanda, and that chanda is a morally neutral quality. It's whereas the kind of desire that always causes discord and suffering is called tanha, which literally translates as thirst, or craving. Chanda is more like zeal or interest. It's like that sort of movement of the heart towards, or like igniting the quality of interest and engagement. And the Buddha pointed out that in order to do anything, whether it's digging a vegetable garden, realizing complete enlightenment, or shooting a pheasant, whatever it might be, any action, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative, karmically, it has to succeed. You have to begin with chanda. There has to be that quality of interest and engagement. And so I'd say that hope, as a genuinely beneficial spiritual quality, it's based on that, in a sense, the recognition that there's always a potential for liberation, and that if our actions or our intentions are steered towards that, then we have a reason to hope. Does that make sense? Yeah. There isn't really there's no in the normal Buddhist vernacular. There's no concept that regularly gets translated as hope. Like you never see hope in any of the lists of the Buddha's qualities that you're kind of prompting. But just seeing how in the Christian tradition that it's listed with such prominence and is seen as something so significant. To me, what I like to do with those kind of things is, if I look at and see the setting of it, the context in which it's used, then I consider, okay, what must that be talking about? Because it can't be, say, hope in a way that we would normally use it. So that's how I would explore those kind of terms.
Ajahn,
Yes.
could you say more about what you've been speaking about, trying to realize the not here when we meditate, to realize that this point which seems to be here is actually not here?
Well, the last thing I was talking about was really applying that kind of focus when you're using insight meditation. So you're using a reflective thought. So or you're using the capacity of the mind to frame a thought or use a brief statement to illuminate the habits of attachment that are there. So if the mind is quite busy and chattering away, then if you just introduce the word here-ness or where is here, if it's just in the midst of a pile of verbiage, it's not going to have any very useful effect. So that kind of to use that kind of practice or develop it, there needs to be a basis of calm and inner quietude first of all. And so when the mind is quite focused, and as you would for insight meditation practice, that there's a steadiness of attention on the present, and then an embracing of the flow of perception, sounds that you're hearing, sensations in the body, different thoughts or such that are arising, different textures of mood that are coming and going, but the attention is resting easily in the present. So that within that there's a recognition of the quality of change, of transiency, also the quality of not self. And so then in that, when that quality of steadiness of attention and spaciousness is established, then you would bring in a question like, where is here? Or often I'd find that if you just repeat the same question or the same statement, the mind gets inured to it very easily. So often I'd find you need to just tweak the statement or the question, just move it around a bit just to keep it fresh. So I would also use a question like, where is this happening? And what you find is that when that kind of a question is brought into the clear space of awareness, then the presumptuousness of the word where, just like it's similarly with who, to investigate the feeling of self, almost as the word is formed, that something feels wrong. That there's that you're drawing upon the intuitive wisdom that recognizes where doesn't really apply, and it's not as though that's a conceptual thought that you're plastering on top of it. It's just that feeling of, oh, that's not quite right, or why that's out of order, or that's presuming a reality that doesn't really exist. So that then, as you drop in a statement like "where is here," or "where is this happening," "where is this experienced," or you're just using a word like here-ness, or just here, to keep it extremely simple, then as that's dropped into that fertile space, and then there's that hesitation, like the habitual mind that is continually constructing my ordinary everyday world with time and me and place woven into it. Then there's a hesitation. There's almost like a stumbling. It's like, oh, and then there's what Lumpur Sumedho likes to say, there's a gap. There's a gap that opens up when you bring that in, that habitual self and time and location forming habit is interrupted. It hesitates. It sort of trips over its own feet. And there's a gap that opens up, even for just like half a second. So then, just to try to keep the attention on that, when the mind goes, oh, before it even comes up with any other words at all, or any verbal answer, that very hesitancy is the thing that is being aimed at. So then, just to see how the perspective shifts when that feeling of location drops away, when that is challenged, and then there's a quality of openness, and that unlocated quality of awareness becomes apparent. Then just sustain that as long as possible before something comes in and it drifts. Avijja, ignorance arises and diverts the attention. But just to try and stay with that. Another useful reflection is that I also find that is helpful to support this is that three-dimensional space only relates to the physical world. Yeah, we say, oh my mind, and we clutch our head. Right? Or even if you're an Asian, you say, it's in my mind, and you point at your chest, maybe. But the fact is that it's only, in terms of the five khandhas, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, place only relates to the world of form, only to rupa. that the four mental khandhas, the four mental aggregates, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, they have no relationship to three-dimensional space. They don't exist in space. So the habits of saying, my mind, or my mind is all over the place. Those are figures of speech that seem very ordinary to us, very natural. But just to recognize the mind is not anywhere, and that, and I found that just in terms of a reflection, just to bring that up, saying three-dimensional space only relates to the world of form. The mind cannot be defined in any place, and that as a concept is something that we might miss, but it's the actuality of it. And just to bring that into that same kind of practice, you can also ask. I would use a question like, where is the mind? And we use that as a figure of speech. Where's your mind? Like, how could you be so heedless? But just using that as a meditation method, and something again recognizes where doesn't apply. There's a wonderful, in the northern Buddhist scriptures, there's a wonderful sutra called the Shurangama Sutra, and it starts off with a scenario of Ananda going on alms round and almost getting seduced by somebody in the local town because he gets distracted by hearing some kind of magical mantra, and he gets caught up and on the verge of having a spiritual disaster. The Buddha appears and whisks Ananda away, and then he starts off on this dialogue with Ananda, and it's an investigation into perception, and it begins with the Buddha asking Ananda, where is your mind? Or actually, to quote it accurately, somewhere in here. Let's see. The Buddha says to Ananda, "It is the fault of your mind and eyes that you flow and turn. I'm now asking you specifically about your mind and eyes. Where are they now?" And so then, in the manuscript that I had of that sutra, it goes on for about 100 pages. It's incredibly thorough, and Ananda keeps coming up with these places where his mind is. And then the Buddha says, no, it's not there because X, Y, Z. No, it's not there because X, Y, Z. And finally Ananda throws his arms up and says, "Please illuminate us, Venerable Sir, where is my mind?" And he says, "Ananda, the mind cannot be defined anywhere. Awareness does not apply." So that's another angle of approach that I would use. And when you do this, you're not looking for a verbal answer to that kind of a question. So when you ask the question, "Where is your mind?" or "Where is here?" it's not some kind of fancy philosophical answer you're looking for. What's being looked for is the hesitation. It's the confounding of the thinking mind, and then to sustain the attention on that gap, that sort of oh. Okay. And then stay with that as long as you can, and then when that erodes and drifts away, then to come back with the same statement or a similar one to just keep opening that up. So then that unlocated awareness becomes familiar ground, groundless ground. Does that make sense to people? Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Just try and work it. It's a difficult question. What conditioned phenomena, what compounded phenomena we perceive to ourselves, is in a state of flux, so there's flux and change.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a permanent thing that's changing, but we're caught up in these conditions of flux and change. Now, in Buddhism, the Dhamma is described as permanent, unchanging. Now, you then have the mind that perceives this flux and change.
Mm-hmm.
This mind that perceives the unchanging environment that it's reached. So what is that mind if there isn't a body? Something must perceive. It's a question I always ask myself.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult question I ask myself. What actually perceives these things?
Well, it's a very good question, and you're not the first person to ask. But what you can say is that well, one way of expressing it is to say that the Buddha arises from the Dhamma, and the Buddha represents the quality of wisdom or awareness. So that's a way of saying the quality of awareness is an attribute of the Dhamma. So that when the mind is fully awakened, what's being experienced is the Dhamma knowing its own nature.
But even the Dhamma must be subject to change. All things are subject to change. Or are you saying that when the illusion of self,
Mm-hmm.
when that illusion is not discovered but realised,
Mm-hmm.
then that is nirvana itself?
Well, when the Dhamma is described as being timeless rather than being permanent. So permanent means like a thing which exists and carries on through time, where Dhamma is described as being akaliko, or timeless. It's outside of the dimension of time. So that again, words stretch, again quoting T.S. Eliot, crack and bend to fit the reality. But if the Dhamma is timeless, so it's not something that's beginning and ending. It's not a thing that's beginning and ending, but it's a transcendent quality, and the aspect of awareness in a way is an attribute of Dhamma. And so that when the feeling of self, when that drops away, and that awareness is unobstructed, then what is realized is that fundamental reality. It's like the mind knowing its own nature, the Dhamma knowing its own nature.
The watch has moved away, hasn't it? And there's an awareness, but there's nothing you would call that as aware.
There's no thing. But there's not. If there's a feeling of a watcher or a separate observer, that's a subtle sense of identity. So that's the kind of thing I was talking about with this, which is really interesting, and it's a good point to bring up, because this looking at the feeling of awareness or locatedness. Often, when in meditation, we can create a sense of the watcher or the observer that's somehow separate from what is seen, and then we can create a subtle sense of identity around that watching. But that sort of the feeling of the separate watcher needs to be let go of as well. So there's watching, there's an awareness, there's a knowing, but it's not abstracted from what's being known. So that there's in a way, what I like to use the phrase unentangled participation, rather than being the watcher or being the knower, because you can still build. At least I find for myself in meditation, you can still make this little bubble of me, like the video the closed circuit TV camera that's sort of watching everything. and not caught up in it, but there's a strange kind of abstraction. But when we really let go, there's more like the awareness of a participating in experience, but there's no entanglement, no limitation that's involved with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you use the word Dhamma,
Mm-hmm.
if I change that for God, there wouldn't be any difference.
Not much. Well, when they try to translate the Bible into Thai, in Thailand, they tried to avoid using all Buddhist language, but since about 40% of the Thai language comes from Buddhist terms, it was rather difficult. So when they got to the Gospel of John, it began something like, "In the beginning was the noun." And Ajahn Buddhadasa, he's passed away now, but he was this very eminent philosopher, a wonderful teacher in Thailand. He's very ecumenically minded as well. He thought, "Oh, good grief, this is terrible." So he said, "Look, can I help you?" And so he actually volunteered to help them translate the Bible into Thai. He pointed out that, I know I'm a Buddhist monk and I know you want to avoid using Buddhist terms, but actually you can put them to good use, and it could be more accurate. It could communicate more accurately what you're trying to say. And so the eventual translation for the beginning of Gospel of John was, "In the beginning was the Dhamma." which is closer to the Greek logos than even the English word. So, but also Ajahn Buddhadasa would similarly say that the word Dhamma is the best translation you have for the Christian term God, and particularly if you're not thinking of God just in terms of a sort of super being up in the sky, but more of the sort of fundamental ordering principle of reality. And so that he would freely move back and forth between those terms if he was talking to a Western audience. It can get confusing if we got strong conditioning or the theistic model, because in Buddhist philosophy you can't, and that's why I began the talk by saying any way you try and put the Dharma out there is going to be wide of the mark, because in terms of Buddhist teachings, Dhamma is only. You can't conceive of yourself separate from the Dhamma. It just doesn't. There's no way you can arrange. You can fit it. That you can't meaningfully do that in using Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist teachings. And so that it's a somewhat different model, because so much of Christian teachings are about feeling me separate from God and trying to get united with that. But it's more in Buddhist practice. It's more recognizing that the Dhamma is the fundamental reality of all things, and we might not have realized that. There's a separation in terms of, because of ignorance, the mind is clouded, and that fundamental quality has not been realized. But if greed, hatred, and delusion are let go of, then the realization of that fundamental reality of what we are and what all things are will become apparent. So it's not God as a super being somewhere else, or as a creator who sort of sparked the universe into being, but more like the Christian theological idea of the Godhead, like the sort of fundamental, a more sort of non-theistic or formless quality that is kind of underlying all things. Yeah, please. A funny question. Go ahead.
Who is the I? If there's no I, who is the I who is appreciating the qualities of the Dhamma and appreciating the qualities of building equanimity and awareness of the nature? Is there a simple way of understanding?
Mm-hmm. There was a young man who said, "Though it appears that I know, what I'd like to see is the I that knows me when I know that I know that I know." I didn't make that up. Well, again, it's a presumption that there's an I who's the experiencer. And so with insight meditation, what is being explored is that the recognition, there's an awareness, there's a knowing, and the feeling of I arises within that, as that's something that is known, that when you're using the investigation into self, then that when, say, that you're watching the activity of the mind, and then it says, who is it that's knowing this? And then, that's a question. Who is it that's knowing this? That question arises and ceases. There's an awareness of that question. It comes into being. That awareness is not a person. It's not a guy in a purple t-shirt. It's not a human. It's just knowing. And so that when we say, but I'm not a guy in a purple t-shirt. You are, but a Buddhist monk in a robe. Say, well, yes, from the outside you can call it that, but inside, the experience of it is there's a knowing, and that's not female, it's not male, it's not old, it's not young. It's a present quality that is aware of the arising and passing of experiences. So, with insight meditation, what's being done is the effort to stay and with that quality of awareness, being that knowing, that unentangled participating. So there's seeing the perceptions of I and the self-creating habits coming into being, doing their thing. And even when the mind goes, right, I'm the knowing, that's what I am. It's like, well, that's a thought too. I am the knowing. It's like staying at the back wall of experience. And any kind of forming of that or naming of that, that's what I am. I'm the ultimate reality. That's right. Ajahn Amaro told me. It's like you just taken a thought about an experience and then grabbed the thought and tried to hold on to that. So the aim of the practice is always staying with that quality of knowing, of being that awareness, and then from that quality of attunement and being that knowing, then our actions and responses to the moment come forth from that quality of attunement. Even though it might look from the outside like I'm deciding to say this, or I'm choosing to move my hand in this particular way, that even choices that have got our name written on them are still not self.
I'm glad I asked the question, yeah. Thank you, yeah. What I was looking for.
Or somebody was. Something was. There was a looking. Right. Yes, please.
Personally, I find that during a sitting meditation or walking meditation, we can see this skill of being aware, the skillful attention to our feelings, our body. But when we finish that practice, when we're in our daily lives, when we've got a lot of sort of inputs coming in, stimulation, it's difficult to keep that attention. And I wanted to ask you, is it right to assume that the more meditation we do, be it sort of sitting or walking meditation, that skill will naturally just sort of flow on into our sort of daily lives when we're not, say, in that sort of focused meditation? Or is there some sort of practical skill that you can suggest for our sort of daily lives? When we're sort of caught up with things, and there's so many things sort of happening all in one moment possibly, and it's difficult to keep that attention. We get I personally get run away with my feelings. I can feel that happening. And then in the evening when I'm meditating, I can reflect on it. But actually, it's a bit too late. It's too practical about it at the time.
Well, it depends a lot on how you handle the meditation and what you relate to as the meditation. Because sometimes we can hold the meditation as a sort of this nice little safe place where I just shut the world out and I've got my little balloon where everything is good. And if that's how we hold meditation, I mean, it's fair enough. It's nice to have at least a little quiet space. But if what we're doing is with our efforts to concentrate and to focus the mind, that we're in a sense just holding the world at bay and then making this a special little peaceful spot, then it's hard to then translate whatever the skills that you learn in the meditation to a broader scope. I remember years ago I was leading a retreat here, and I was doing a particular kind of mindfulness of breathing meditation that was based on following the breath at the heart center and using it together with loving kindness practice. And about the fourth or fifth day of the retreat, I was doing the interviews, and this woman came in and says, "Ajahn Amaro, you've ruined my life. I hate you." But she had a big smile on her face, so I thought, okay, well, I'm probably safe here. She said, "I hate you. You've ruined my life." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?" And she said, "Well, I run a psychiatric nursing unit. I have to do this enormous amount of damage control during the course of the day. My working life is complete chaos. But I've been practicing meditation for years and years, and I'm really pleased with how I handle my mind. So I come home, get myself settled, sit down, and my mind will be clear and peaceful and bright." He says, "And now, it's like I was up in this beautiful attic space, and I had all the skylights and the beautiful white walls and the sunlight coming in. And now you've made me go down and explore the rest of the house, and it's chaos down there." I've always remembered that because I thought it described it very well, because she did have very good powers of concentration, and so what she was able to do was, when the day finished, she could just go and sit down and meditate, and she could put all of the effects of the day off to the edges and just have a nice, peaceful, quiet, bright spot. But there was all this huge amount of unfinished business. There was chaos down in the rest of the of the building that she wasn't paying attention to. And so then that practice of in a way just bringing the attention to the realm of feeling and mood, it kind of messed up her beautiful, safe spot. It doesn't really matter that you've got a nice place up in the attic if the kids are going berserk down in causing havoc in the kitchen and the sitting room. So when the meditation is more integrated in that way, if you use the time for meditation practice to not just be creating a pleasant little bubble, but you're bringing more attention to the realm of feelings, like the effects of the day, just letting yourself be aware of the resonances of the day, and to sort of develop mindfulness of the different effects that your encounters have had, that even if, when you've lost your temper, or you got really excited or really frightened, or angry in the traffic, such like, just to let those, if those come up, just to let those be known rather than just shutting that out. And in particular, what's helpful in developing that broader scope of meditation is using mindfulness of the body. And so in that, with the meditation, to use the first, say, 10-15 minutes to bring the attention to the body and really let yourself know what the sensations are through the body. Let yourself really get settled down. Notice where the tensions and knots are in the body. And developing through the meditation, use the body as a reference point, so that, say, you're using the mindfulness of breathing as a focus. Every so often, every 5-10 minutes, just bring your attention back into the rest of the body. So, okay, well, I've been on the breath for 20 minutes now. So, what's happening in my face? Are my teeth clenched? Are my eyes scrunched up? What's happening in my shoulders? What's happening in my hip joints? And so that you're bringing the body into focus as a reference point, and also in seeing how, when we try and work with the mind, often we can get so involved with the mental world that we forget the presence of the body and the influence that the body is having on us. So in the sitting meditation, developing much more of a referencing the body and body feelings. Then during the course of the day, what I like to recommend is using the mindfulness of the body throughout the daily activity, so that you're obviously you're more engaged with people. You're doing things. You're going, having conversations, and you're performing as a person far more than you are when you're on the cushion. But still, the body's there, and the body never wanders off into the past and the future. Yeah, it's very reliable. It's always right here. So you're absolutely guaranteed contact point with the here and now. The body, it never drifts. It's very reliable. So, just bringing that into into the sort of day-to-day, moment-to-moment focus of your awareness, remembering to do that. Also, you can set little tasks for yourself, or just say, okay, whenever I walk anywhere, whether it's around the office, down the pavement, or through the supermarket, if ever I'm doing any kind of walking at all, I'll bring my attention into my feet, and I'll just notice the feeling of walking. Or every time I go through a door, I'll make a point of paying close attention, not doing everything in slow motion. Don't do that. It'll drive your people in the workplace completely nuts. So it's not a matter. Being mindful doesn't mean doing things in slow motion. It just means paying attention. So just simple things like that. When you go through a door, just notice that feeling of turning the handle, going through a door. Just little checkpoints during the course of a day. To say, okay, what's the body doing? How am I feeling? And they think, whoa, am I on the way somewhere? Like, just to notice, gee, there's this huge feeling of urgency here, or this feeling of boredom, or excitement, or whatever. So it's just bringing that attention in, noticing how does that feel in the body? What's this? Not just the sensations of the action, but what's the way that we're holding the body? What way is the mood and the attitude being held in the physical realm? And those little ways of checking in through the course of the day are really helpful. Even if you get to 4:45 and you realize, I was going to keep track of my footsteps today. It's nearly 5 o'clock, and I've only just remembered I've got a body. This can happen, to the best of us. But even then, it's just to recognize, wow, look at that. I was so tied up throughout the day, I completely spaced out the fact of practicing with this at all. Look at that. And even though you've lost it for the previous 7.5 hours, at that point, you think, well, look at that. I was so caught up in this project, or that breakfast meeting was so annoying that my mind was stuck on that for all this time. Look at that. So then even when you lose it, you're ploughing that back into being an encouragement to pay closer attention. But the main thing I would say in terms of developing an ongoing awareness is mindfulness of the body is hard to beat. And also just that when you're feeling, bringing the attention into the body and you're noticing the feelings that are there, then before you try and do anything with it, like, oh, I should relax, I'm uptight, relax, just let yourself feel what it's like to be tense. Just sort of stay with the urgency or the tension or the feeling of being hassled or hot or whatever. And before you try and do anything with it, just let yourself know, what's that like? So rather than, oh, this is an uncomfortable feeling, I should let go of this. That rather than that, just letting the awareness have its effect, like knowing that the effect of being caught up in a mood or in a state, and then just letting the sheer and simple awareness of it be where the letting go comes from. Does that make sense? Because oftentimes we think we can follow an instruction, like, oh yeah, I'm uptight here, I should let go, and we're just following another should. Whereas instead, if we're clinging to something, like, and I don't know, I think, gee, I'm really tense, I'm uptight. Well, this kind of, life is really, really difficult. Then, and I look and I think, oh, that's where it's coming from. This is really a burden. Then, once you see where it's coming from, then the relaxation just comes from your seeing. Like, why am I doing that to myself? So the letting go and the relaxation with it, the coming back into balance is coming from a much more basic and intuitive place rather than oh, Ajahn Amaro told me I should do this, so I should, and it's just it's more coming from the head. But the other is just like, ow, this is burning. Like, what am I holding this thing for? Like,
if there are, say, subtle feelings of, say, anger or hatred, I mean, not gross feelings, subtle things, or greed, would you say, and you say you've noticed that, would you say, well, actually it's best to hold off on any decision here, I'm just going to sort of be with this feeling, or once you notice that feeling, will it naturally maybe bring some sort of balance into what you're about to think or say?
yes, well, it's best to, if you know there's that feeling, like you're feeling angry or greedy, then it's best to pause. If there seems to be a possibility of pausing, like give the other person your credit card, say, can you hold this for 10 minutes? Well, just till we get past these shops, you know. You know, so that you know, if you know that there's this sort of wave of then it's good to just take those kind of steps to I mean, not necessarily giving somebody else your credit card. I mean, if you really, but still knowing, like, okay, I have to get really, really careful when I go, you know, to that part of town because, or when I see those adverts, because I'm really convinced I have to have the newest, the latest, whatever it is. I was at a Dalai Lama's teachings once, and he was. It was a kind of conference. I think it was it was at MIT in Massachusetts, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and where he was staying, the hotel, there was this whole line of electronics shops, and the Dalai Lama was quite a gadget freak. He said if he wasn't the Dalai Lama, he'd be an engineer. He was an electrical engineer. He has his fantasies of being an electrical engineer. And so his limousine would take him past all these electronics shops, and he'd find himself. And this feeling, and he was talking about this to like 3,000 people, you know, about these feelings of temptation of like, oh, maybe some way I could get the driver to stop, and we could just kind of have a look. And he was talking about these, how his mind was going through cartwheels, trying to figure out some sort of viable way he could get the driver to stop, and he could have he as the Dalai Lama with, you know, his entourage and security men just popping in to Radio Shack to look at their gadgets, but he was talking about it as a way of speaking about desire. And he said, he said, actually, I was very grateful that I had to get to this meeting, and that that I didn't have a reasonable excuse to get the driver to stop, because then I could look at this feeling of desire, and also knowing that if the car had taken a different route, I wouldn't have felt so disturbed and filled with that. Oh, I got it. Oh, but he said because the car went by that route, that then he was tempted. And saw the interest arising and the excitement about, ooh, I wonder if they've got the new, and that so it was. It's something that everybody experiences. So don't feel like you're a terrible person if you have those feelings of irritation or desire, but also recognizing where your weak spots are. And so the Buddha was very practical. He said, if you know that going someplace is going to be dangerous, don't go there. Go somewhere else. It's not like you should be strong enough to go to that dangerous place where there's lots of temptation and just muscle through. He was very practical. He said, no, if you know a place is dangerous and difficult, go somewhere else. Don't go there. And, so it's useful to know things that get you really upset, or things that make you frightened, or things that make you greedy. Say, okay, well, let's be cautious here. Okay, so I see the time is about 4:15. I'm not sure what time we wind up, but
4 o'clock.
Okay. Not tomorrow, right? So maybe that's a good point to wind things up for this afternoon. Thank you all for your good attention and wonderful questions. And, see you all again.